Welcome to the Tyler Werner Show, post-Super Bowl edition. But definitely we got some Eagles issues we can talk about. In regards to the Super Bowl, actually, I think it's a little... The Denver Broncos victory, to me, is a bit symbolic of perhaps the way this Philadelphia Eagles team can build. I just want to, foreshadow that out of the chute, and I guess to sum up the Super Bowl, I mean, I was a little disappointed, obviously, with the Carolina Panthers. And, not coming out, I don't know, the way I expected them to. I mean, the tone was really set when Von Miller, Super Bowl MVP, Cam Newton and the Denver Broncos were covered in the end zone, and just like that, they're up 10-0. I was fairly disappointed though that the NFL officials they tend to be so steadfast in their calls that that one big catch that would have been a first down and could have perhaps significantly the outcome of that drive, perhaps, that catch was not overturned, and that essentially, a play or two later, strip sack, and Denver Broncos are up 10-0. But that's the officiate, and then just the other play when Peyton Manning got knocked down. He got back up, and the referees thought that he wasn't down by contact. And I don't know. There's how many of you out there, and not one of them saw that. And of course, the challenge gets reversed. And so it's, and it's one of these things, these concerns that what if you can only use two challenges of a half or whatever, and What if another dumb call was made in the rest of the second half, and the Panthers couldn't challenge it because they're out of challenges when it was a stupid call and could have perhaps changed? I don't know, but that's just me. It kind of mind boggles me when calls, and people say, oh well, things can go both ways, but sometimes these things don't have to happen when bad calls like the one on that catch don't get reversed, and it could very well perhaps shift the direction of the game. I mean, look what happened. What many would call the biggest play of the Super Bowl and the tone setter, that strip sack on Von Miller on Cam Newton. And again, this is another little tidbit. I don't know, but sometimes this gets called, sometimes it doesn't. But there was some hand to the face action there, and it depends. I guess it depends on the officiating crew or whatever. But a little consistency, I guess, is what would be nice. And again, when it comes to the biggest game of the year as well, but not to take anything away from the Denver Broncos defense. Because this was a defensive game. I mean, the Panthers, they had plenty of chances to, and it seemed like every time the Panthers started moving the ball down the field, getting into field goal range, or perhaps, in position to score a touchdown, they were unable to. They turned the ball over. I mean, Von Miller, Marcus Ware, this defense, they were all over Cam Newton, giving him fits all game long. And certainly, it showed. Cam Newton, throws a crucial pick, although it probably should have been caught by his receiver. And that's another thing, too. I think, I know I'm in the minority here because a lot of people like to rip Cam Newton for his celebrations and whatnot, And he never really had a reason to celebrate in this game. They never got up. They were always, they were always behind pretty much the whole game, and they were unable to turn the tide, I guess. Even after Luke Kuechly kind of, I think, set a possible momentum swinger of a sack, Panthers go down the field, score a touchdown, the only offensive touchdown of the whole game. But then after that, they just, go down the field, turn the ball over, or miss a field goal that you got to make in the biggest game of the year. Maybe the biggest game of your career. And again, whether missed opportunities or whatever, just not ready for the moment, or just that this Denver Broncos defense is stacked and caught the Panthers the right time, the right situation, so much that the mighty Peyton Manning, if you want to call him mighty or not, he didn't really have to do anything this game.
Chicken parm, you taste so good.
I was a little, again, and this is another thing why the game fell flat. I mean, look, it was a defensive Super Bowl, and certainly it was more of the defenses. I mean, Panthers defense, they were, the only time they really allowed any points is when they had to come out on the field and the Broncos were already in field goal range, with the exception of the first drive of the game, which they still held them to a field goal. But that was really the only drive when the Broncos were kind of going the majority of the field to put some kind of points on the board. And again, this comes back to why this game was disappointing to me. I mean, the Broncos defense, they kind of spoiled it. And Cam Newton not going into the pile to get that fumble late in the game, kind of like looking as if to dive in for the ball, and then just whether it was doesn't want to hurt himself or not, he just, comes out and doesn't bother getting on top of the ball to at least keep the game alive. To which many people would basically go on to say to Cam Newton, "Loser, you're a loser. Loser, you're a loser." So that was a little, disappointed in that. Disappointed that the Panthers, they had that miscue, which led to that very long Denver Broncos punt return. I mean, it's like how... And there was a rationale given, I guess, by Phil Simms. Maybe they were they afraid that they got in contact with it and that there was going to be a penalty. And I mean, that was just a disappointment. Surely enough, as they went on to say just a moment before that, there had never been a punt return for a touchdown in Super Bowl history, and well, it almost happened there. So that was disappointing. Disappointing drops by the Carolina Panthers receivers. And of course, to me above all else, it was disappointing that essentially Peyton Manning did not have to have that drive pretty much at all the entire game, where the Broncos were down, say especially in the fourth quarter, where, okay, Peyton Manning, he has to lead the team down the field passing the ball. Not enough time to run or whatever. It's just not ideal. Can Peyton Manning lead this team down the field throwing the ball to perhaps, cement his second Super Bowl win? It didn't go like that. And while I'm sure Peyton Manning was perfectly fine with that, and just the Denver Broncos in general, and the fan base, many of which suddenly came out in the last 2 weeks, and especially in the Super Bowl, on Facebook posts going out and buying Denver Broncos jerseys, I guess just to look like a fan, even though you have no connection to them whatsoever. Bandwagon fans. It was just a disappointing game. And again, part of that is because the Denver Broncos defense played so well. And that the Panthers just miscues, disappointment. Not good. Not a good start to the game, and they were never able to really fully recover from that. So again, it's a shame. Again, like, at least from my perspective, since I'm not a fan of either team, all right, since I'm more of an analyst in this situation who picked the Carolina Panthers to win, and for me, just, you know, as a neutral guy, just wants to see an interesting game. You know, like, I wanted to see Peyton Manning, like, in that situation where, you know, he has to lead the team down the field and score here. The game is on the line. It was never really in that kind of situation, and that was a shame. Part of that's because, again, their defense played well, which, you know, credit to Denver. I liked the, you know, the plays that Denver was making on defense, but again, from my perspective, it would have been nice if the Panthers, you know, again, receivers may have caught that, you know, caught this pass, that pass a little more. That you got to catch in the biggest game of the Super Bowl. I heard Phil Simms at one point say that, like, Cam Newton threw a ball too hard, and it's like, what are you talking about? These are his receivers. He's throwing hard passes all the time to them. This is the biggest game of the year. This is the NFL. You know, it's supposed to be the top two teams against each other. You're supposed to catch that football. That was another disappointing part about this game, the commentary, with all due respect. I'm more of an Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth guy, and I'll go Joe Buck and and Troy Aikman over, but, you know, that's who it was. And there was a disappointing statistic too, where I guess they forgot that Mike Ditka did play for the Chicago Bears at one point, and then later on he would coach them to their first Super Bowl championship. I guess when they mentioned that Gary Kubiak would be the first head coach to coach the Denver Broncos to win the Super Bowl, having played for them before. I believe that's how it was worded. And yeah, again, I mean, I guess they kind of fell flat on the statistic there. Even though Ditka didn't, you know, when Ditka played for the Bears, that was before the Super Bowl, you know, one of those things. But, so, you know, the game itself, I mean, was kind of disappointing in my mind. Oh, not to mention the Clocks by Coldplay intro. Did I mention? Well, the commercials, to me, what I watched of them just flat out sucked. You know, again, I'm never really a fan of the commercials. I mean, they're just, I don't know. To me, they're typically, I mean, the one I see that was like, that seemed to drag on forever, like 1.5 minutes. I forget, was it a Honda commercial or something with a red car, and there's like this far-fetched cop chase, and it's like, really? Like, is that the best you can do? It's just, I don't know, just garbage like that I see. And then it's like, alright, I don't want to, these commercials, they kind of suck as it is, like usual, maybe a little more so than normal, so I'm just not even gonna pay attention to them.
I'm not dealing with this today.
That's pretty much what I ended up doing. So, I mean, you know, there's probably a bunch of commercials that I didn't watch as a result, and as usual, and That's just me. I don't know. Maybe a little more, but I just like if I'm gonna want to watch a commercial that's that long. I don't want it to be, this goofy, far-fetched nonsense like that just, I don't know, comes off as cartoonish. But that's just me. You can be a little more creative than that too, as well. If this is going to be played during the Super Bowl, but I don't know, that's just me. And yeah, the halftime show, to me, I mean, don't even get me started. But I sat here last week and I'm like saying, oh well, the Coldplay set, it could be, I could see Clocks getting played in there. Maybe Speed of Sound, Viva La Vida. All right, so my synopsis on the Coldplay end. See, first of all, this should have been, to me, this halftime show should have been advertised as Coldplay playing fragments of some of their good songs, and then, playing backseat to Bruno Mars and Beyonce, who we've already seen in Super Bowl halftime shows, and just turning into another generic pop fest that I don't know. To me, it's about special effects and glam outfits and colors, dancing. That's fine. If you enjoy that, fine. I was disappointed because Coldplay comes out, and it's one of these things where it's like, all right, you guys gotta kind of keep your set short. You gotta keep your songs. You gotta play fragments of your songs. So right off the bat, I'm disappointed. The only song that they really play that, to me, is a decent Coldplay song and not their generic pop stuff that you've kind of seen in recent years. It's like now they just go with the flow as far as writing is concerned. Which I guess they played some more recent stuff later on in the show that I just, again, I'm not into, and to me, to me is less innovative, it's less intriguing from a musical standpoint, and I mean, that's just me being a, I guess somewhat musician, I guess you could say, out in the middle of nowhere. But they play Viva La Vida like in a fraction form, and that's the disappointing thing. Like, a song like that, I feel like is well put together, and it's like they were speeding it along. They were like they played a verse and they went into a chorus, and then like they went like right from the first chorus to, I guess, the build up, if you want to call it, to the second chorus and basically the end of it. They basically admitted, they trimmed out a decent amount of the song and decent portions, and I just hate when they do that. I hate when performers like Coldplay or they have to do that for the Super Bowl for the sake of time, so they can, I guess, make more time for Beyonce and Bruno Mars and these other pop repeats here in the Super Bowl halftime show, while Pearl Jam, while Foo Fighters, while Metallica hasn't, I guess, even been offered a spot yet to play at the Super Bowl halftime show. I don't know, just amongst some of the biggest rock bands that still play in the world today. But that's just me, who have sold plenty of albums. All right, if you want to bring up, they're not as commercial. There's plenty of people out there, more so, who would probably want to hear that than these generic pop fest shows that are just becoming repeats in my mind. So yeah, Coldplay plays a fragment, half of Viva La Vida, and then they kind of like deferred to Beyonce and Bruno Mars. And there's at one point when Chris Martin, frontman of Coldplay, he goes to the piano and he plays about a measure or two of Clocks, and then drifts off into other, piano fanfare or whatever. And I'm thinking, seriously, Clocks is like one of the quintessential Coldplay songs as far as I'm concerned. And they only have time. They only play one measure, like one or two measures of the intro piano riff. I mean, it's like, seriously. That was a disappointing thing to me. No speed of sound, obviously, and basically from then on, it was just any Coldplay that they played was just, generic modern stuff, and it seems like they've kind of run their course as far as writing, good stuff like Clocks and Speed of Sound on the X and Y album, and Viva La Vida. And again, I'm not the biggest Coldplay fan in the world, but the fact that they played like half of one of their decent songs was a flat out disappointment to me. And whether, part of that was to, I guess, promote more of their more recent material that to me is weaker material, and to make time for Beyonce and Bruno Mars to reemerge and make repeat appearances. And they, like, Chris Martin, like, kind of do like karaoke with, in between them, and it's just a flat out disappointment. It's all about the theatrics now. It's not about the performances and the music, the intriguing parts of the music, and just a disappointment. And I don't know, it's like they need, get all these people out there, dancers, coordination, and whatnot. You can make it better, more about the music. You just get, you get the 4 or 5 guys of, whether it be Pearl Jam or Metallica or Foo Fighters, guys who, I at this point are becoming overdue to me. If you can have Coldplay out there as, a semi-rock band, you can have, any of these other bands that, I guess I'll continue to mention year after year until, if they ever get in a Super Bowl halftime show. You can have these guys, you can just, let them play their music and just, their equipment, watch them perform their legendary music. It's simple, You can still have a decent looking stage and whatnot, but you can watch and listen to them rock it out. Maybe reintroduce that a little bit more into the halftime show, instead of making these basically like these theatrical halftime shows that are just, to me at this point, they're just kind of bleeding into one another, and I don't know. That's just me. Again, should have been advertised more as Coldplay playing fractions of their songs and taking the back seat to Bruno Mars and Beyonce making repeat appearances, to the having only played a couple, 2-3 years ago in the Super Bowl respectively. I don't know. So in a nutshell, what it's kind of not the most entertaining Super Bowl in the world to me. Again, I mean, the game just, the Panthers, a little disappointing. I would have been, again, disappointed if I were the Panthers, and after that catch early the game was not overturned. I would have been more fired up about it, but essentially what happened Von Miller, strip sack for a touchdown, and that essentially was the big play of the game, essentially, that set the tone the rest of the way. Now, this leads me to this. The Eagles, and I've kind of said this before, I like the staff. I like the selection. Obviously, Jim Schwartz being the new defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. It seems as though already, yesterday with Anthony Gargano in the morning show, Connor Barwin was on, and he basically said,
Oh, man.
I'm going to be back on defensive end now, because the 4-3 transitioning back to that, maybe the better fit this personnel, is the direction that Jim Schwartz is taking. And it just, it seems like that is a good good fit for defensive coordinator. It feels like this team, and especially now without these hurry up drives that would go 3 and out time after time again, that this can really help the defense. I think that alone, the fact that they won't be hurrying up and going 3 and out too often, by default kind of makes the defense better, does it not?
Was that like a
So I'm kind of glad that I feel like defensively, this what they do in the secondary, and that that's kind of the key, how they improve in that regards. Mainly the quarterback position on defense. It's one of these things where I feel maybe they could still maybe use a couple upgrades, because the Denver defense is stacked, obviously, but perhaps another year, and this maybe this Eagles defense, they can enter that elite status. Well, again, see what in the draft, free agency, personnel-wise, they could maybe use a couple upgrades. But it seems like they're heading in the right direction on defense. Let's be fair, too. Certainly this Eagles defense, they just started showing signs that they were done this season. Tampa Bay week and Detroit, when it looked like this Eagles team was just coming apart at the seams. Part of that, I feel like the Eagles defense, they were just, having quite a season, and that having to be out on the field as much as they had to be out there because of the offense stalling time and time again, I think took a toll on the defense, and I feel as though this defense can be heading in the right direction. And we saw that in this Super Bowl, you have a good enough defense like that, you can beat the 17-1 Carolina Panthers, essentially is what they were heading in that game. You can win the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning, who doesn't have to do much, who can throw for 140 yards, 14 for 23 or whatever he was. He didn't even have to throw a touchdown pass. C.J. Anderson had a decent game. Just like DeMarco Murray can have some decent games. Perhaps, more decent games. Maybe now that he can be more of the feature back like he was meant to be. He can maybe be used more properly. Maybe this offensive line can get improved the next season or two before DeMarco Murray maybe, I don't know, maybe, I guess hits that wall, because I don't think he hit it yet. I think this year was kind of like a break for him, because he didn't see the same amount of action that he did the year before when he led the league in rushing by far. So it was kind of like a respite year for DeMarco Murray, and that's another thing. I'm not saying that this Eagles team, is going to have what it takes to make to the Super Bowl at all. Next year or anything like that, but that this Eagles team, they could be headed in the right direction with some improvements made, obviously, starting with the wide receiver position, where, of course, Riley Cooper was just recently let go by the Philadelphia Eagles. And many would say it's long overdue, including myself. And, yes, Riley Cooper, no longer a Philadelphia Eagle, who's, basically a no-show this entire season. And the year before as well, not too much of a show either. So, whether Nelson Aguilar comes along a little bit this season, maybe what else they do on the outside wide receiver position remains to be seen. So, I kind of mentioned a little bit of everything here, but I haven't mentioned the quarterback position yet. Now, last week, in an interview with Mike Missinelli,
Brindy, how you doing,
Doug
man?
Peterson was quoted as saying, essentially, we're going to have the best quarterback at the end of the day for this, for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, and I was talking about, factors such as going rate, how much do you have to pay Sam Bradford, for instance, and just, factors in general. But basically, Doug Peterson is on the record saying we will have the best quarterback at the end of the day that we can for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, if you ask me right now, well, who is that? As far as who's on the free agency market right now, and the best of that lot is Ryan Fitzpatrick, who, to me, not as good as Sam Brady. Fitzpatrick, to me, is kind of like, a Sanchez, in a way. And you asked me, in the draft, where the Eagles would be able to get anybody in the draft, I don't know, but you asked me, who's that guy, I guess, that can, to me, it's Sam Bradford. Now, you'd probably have to pay Sam Bradford, again, the going rate, $19, $20 million maybe for Sam Bradford. Now, the salary cap did go up, I believe, $8 million, if I'm not mistaken. So that, in that regard, that helps a little bit. Bradford's making $15 million, but if you go on record and you say we'll have the best quarterback at the end of the day for the Philadelphia Eagles, you can't sell me that Fitzpatrick is that guy on the free agency market this year. And you cannot sell me that Nick Foles is also that guy.
How's everyone doing?
However, supposedly, and it's no news at this point, I'm sure, to many Eagles fans, that Nick Foles is supposedly, or that the Philadelphia Eagles, Doug Peterson, is supposedly interested in bringing Nick Foles back to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Let's make some noise, come on!
Now, like I just said, to me, the best, you go on record, it's Sam Bradford. Unless there's a guy in the draft who ends up being better down the road than Sam Bradford, or even next season. But I don't foresee that in this quarterback class. Doesn't mean somebody can't come out of the woodwork and be better as a quarterback and have a better career and just be better overall than Sam Bradford. But I don't see that at this point. I see, and I mean, I've said it before, Sam Bradford, I don't think he did enough to want him to get signed again, for this fill. But that was, it was like he peaked with the Chip Kelly regime. It's a different ball game now that Chip Kelly is obviously gone, and that maybe, they'll run a more conventional offense. They'll be able to, run the ball better, more properly, the way they're meant to be, with DeMarco Murray out there. Again, coming off of a bit of a respite of a season. And maybe run them more between the tackles like they're meant to be. Hopefully improve this offensive line, which, I guess to get to a great level will take a couple years, obviously, and it's not going to happen in 1 year, I would think. Improve the wide receiver position. I mean, as far as best option for quarterback, it is, to me, Sam Bradford at this point. He's superior of a passer to Nick Foles. I mean, just in general. And that's what I thought when, I guess last year, Chip Kelly made the move to get Sam Bradford. Now, I also thought, like many out there thought, it was more of a bargaining chip, no pun intended, to have Sam Bradford to trade and move up to get Marcus Mariota, and that obviously that didn't happen. And here we had Sam Bradford for the season. Now, Bradford, again, as far as a quarterback goes, and comparing him to Nick Foles, and I think it showed more so this season, Bradford played behind a horrendous offensive line, and he got beat up. He's not the most mobile guy in the world, just like Nick Foles is not very mobile. However, Bradford has more arm strength than Foles, and he's more accurate of a passer. When Foles was here, overall he had a better receiving core, whether it was Deshaun Jackson and, Riley Cooper. But the point being, Deshaun Jackson and Jason Avant, you can also, throw in there that first year with Chip Kelly and Nick Foles. Or the second year with Foles, having Macklin to throw to, who had a Pro Bowl season. And, I guess still Riley Cooper. Jordan Matthews, of course. But this year, Bradford, on the outside, he had Josh Huff, who is no Jeremy Macklin, no Deshaun Jackson. At times, Nelson Aguilar, who is a rookie who, again, no Jeremy Macklin, no Deshaun Jackson there. And, of course, Riley Cooper, who was quite invisible for much of this season. So it's basically Zach Ertz, tight end, sometimes Selleck, and Jordan Matthews in the slot. You did not really have an outside game at all. And you especially did not have an offensive line. You had an offensive line that was in shambles, pretty much. Guys getting hurt, this and that. Jason Kelce had a brain fart season, which, I don't know, just doing some wacky things, sometimes snapping the ball early, and a little lost this season. And, of course, Evan Mathis was out the door. And just basically, there was no really refiltering of any guys on the offensive line. As, you need to replace, you need to find an improvement over Harriman's. Again, I wasn't against the whole Harriman's loss. The Evan Mathis loss affected them a little more, I think. And essentially, what happens, you got journeyman offensive linemen out there, and they certainly did not hold their own. Jason Peters had a rough season. He's at borderline retirement stage here, and so obviously Sam Bradford had it tougher than Nick Foles had it here, as far as I'm concerned. Not to mention, all right, that first year, again, with Nick Foles going 27-2, some inflated numbers, Foles had as steady and together as an offensive line as you could have. And again, had Deshaun Jackson, which certainly helped Riley Cooper be a little more open at times, and Jason Avant, reliable receiver. Maybe not a game breaker, but still a reliable receiver. Bradford did not have that luxury here in Philadelphia. He kind of played with a no team in San Francisco. But I still saw this season, at least down the stretch more so, that at times he could be pretty darn good given the circumstances. And this is when the defense was shot at this point in the season. So I think Bradford can, I guess, blossom a little more, if I can use that word, as we're knocking on the door of spring, I guess, sometime, in a month or so. Bradford can maybe blossom more if, again, the offensive line is a little more improved. He has a little more help at receiver. That's just me. And as a matter of fact, had Bradford been in Peyton Manning's place at this point in time, at this stage in the game of Peyton Manning's career, that where he may announce retirement within the next month or whenever. Same deal. Broncos win the Super Bowl. And that's the bottom line. Maybe Nick Foles even out there. I don't know. But Bradford, yeah, they win the Super Bowl. That's the point I make here. Foles is making maybe I guess $12 million right now, but he had, obviously he did not have a good season over in St. Louis. Now he had quite a good rookie running back and a pretty darn good defense in St. Louis. And yet Foles was throwing interceptions. He was just, he looked lost. And it's one of these things where he gets benched for Case Keenum or whatever. And so the arrow for Foles has been pointing down ever since he went to St. Louis, pretty much. And I don't see, again, I feel better with Sam Bradford as the quarterback. I'm not saying Sam Bradford, and I'm not going to expect Sam Bradford to be Tom Brady, to be Aaron Rodgers, because he's just not. But what I do think is that he can be like, say, Joe Flacco a few years ago, when the defense was kind of the focal point, and the focus of that Ravens team. And maybe the ability to run the ball well certainly helps as well. This is kind of what you saw here with Denver. Now, again, the Eagles' defense, they maybe have some upgrades to make before they're at that level of a defense. But if they do make those upgrades, they do run the ball better, and Sam Bradford does a decent job. Doesn't have to have a record-setting season. Doesn't have to have the season Cam Newton have. Doesn't have to have the season that Brady has and continues to have. And of course, gets booed rampantly at the Super Bowl pregame MVP show, or whatever you want to call it, ceremony.
To me, those balls are perfect.
Doesn't have to. You don't need your quarterback to be that good. You need them to be solid. And I think Sam Bradford can be solid. With a better team around him, that's how I feel. Foles at this point, I don't know. Again, 2 years ago, he was playing with some better players, obviously, on offense. An offense that was just more together. The offensive line was like the glue between passing and running. And obviously you don't have that right now with the Philadelphia Eagles. And again, it's just one of these things where Sam Bradford can be that solid quarterback. But right now, I'm not sure if Foles can be. And that's the dilemma here. And obviously I'm not so sure anybody else in this coming draft can be as well. And that even if there is one, or would the Eagles even be in position to get that guy? And probably not even start them right away as it is. Probably groom them for a year before they even start. So that's just where I stand right now. I feel as though Bradford, again, is the best quarterback option that Doug Peterson was kind of quoted as saying they will have in the offseason. But how they define it, how Doug Peterson defines that, I guess may be different than me. But if Nick Foles is here next year, and the Eagle, and Foles is not playing well, and I get this feeling that, I feel like Bradford could be playing better than this, or whoever they have out there. If, say it's not Foles, say it's not Bradford, say Mark Sanchez becomes the starting quarterback next year. And while maybe they have more free cap space as a result, and maybe they end up drafting a quarterback then that they're grooming for the future, but still, that's a question mark. Say it is Mark Sanchez, and he's just stinking it up. Then I'll be looking back on quotes like that with Doug Peterson, like, Sanchez, he's the best quarterback for this Philadelphia Eagles team. Yeah, Sanchez is only making $5 million right now as backup, and yeah, maybe you saved a lot of cap space or whatever, but the quarterback is stinking it up, and that's not going to get the job done as far as leading the way to the Super Bowl, or just even playing well enough, playing decent or solid enough to be in Super Bowl contention and perhaps win a Super Bowl. At least Peyton Manning, played in the playoffs, was playing solid enough. And yeah, maybe there's that extra spark he gave the team or whatever, but at the end of the day, is the quarterback decent enough? And I just, I feel like Sam Bradford, yeah, I can say that. I feel like, what he was doing throughout the season, he made, later in the season, had he had a better team around him, maybe this Eagles team would have won the division like they were supposed to. And that's other factors contribute to that as well. Maybe if the Eagles defense was not as shot late in the season when they needed to not be shot, that could also be another factor. And if the running game was maybe a little more rounded into form, maybe if the offensive line was not as depleted as it was, as well as the outside wide receiving core, those are the things I'm looking at. So that's where I stand here. I mean, I don't know. I mean, not to mention they trade. Well, Chip traded Nick Foles over to St. Louis. No second-round draft pick. And now it's like, you're going to try to bring Nick Foles back? It just, I don't know.
It pisses me off.
I'm not a fan of Nick Foles coming back here. That's just me. People say what they want about freeing up cap space or whatever, but I'd rather have, a defense, a foundation for the defense to build off of. They can refilter guys here and there. Fletcher Cox is obviously going to be the mainstay. He's the guy that you want to build around. Kind of your J.J. Watt in a regard. Not saying he is J.J. Watt, but just the guy that you may, that you want to keep here for pretty much his whole career until he's either retires or until he's just not as effective and worth having on your roster for the amount you're paying him anymore. So that's where I basically stand right now. Nick Foles, I just don't. I think Sam Bradford's the better option, the superior quarterback. I think this season, given the circumstances, Bradford showed that he was at this point right now and going forward that he is a better quarterback than Nick Foles, who again he couldn't cut it with the Rams this year as quarterback. And I think Bradford at least showed something given the circumstances. Showed that maybe he is a little more worthy of starting for the Philadelphia Eagles and getting paid the going rate, I guess, if it's 19 or 20 million, around that mark or whatever. That's where I stand. Where do you stand, Philadelphia Eagles fans? Share your thoughts. Facebook.com/Tyler Werner Show, or on this YouTube video. Where do you stand? After watching that Super Bowl, can the Eagles maybe build in a similar way that the Broncos built themselves? So, with the defense this year, I remember this time last year, the Broncos, things were up in the air with the Broncos. Gary Kubiak gets hired as the new head coach. And Peyton Manning, his status was questionable. People thought he was done. He may retire at that point. He didn't. He came back, and even though he wasn't the focal point of this defense or this team, it was the defense. The running game, kind of a smash mouth style team, even though they do have, some solid wide receivers. Owen Daniels, a solid tight end. I mean, there's quite a team around Peyton Manning. On defense, especially this year, and offense. I mean, so look what they were able to do, and they go and win the Super Bowl. And Peyton Manning did not need to have that quote unquote that drive, or not even one of those drives where is Peyton Manning gonna be able to show flashes of the legend that is Peyton Manning and lead this team down the field and score a needed touchdown. That didn't even have to happen. But you know what? Sometimes that's what does happen when you build a team around a quarterback, even just a decent or average quarterback, well enough, like they did. And as a result, the Broncos Super Bowl 50 champions. So that is it for me. Facebook.com/Tyler Werner Show, as always, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. we got an interesting offseason ahead of us. Of course, Zach Ertz signed to a bit, Brent Selleck signed to their deals, Lane Johnson. Few weeks, well, we got scouting combine coming up for those interested in that, but free agency coming up in a few weeks. Again, I'm interested in seeing who the quarterback's going to be for this Philadelphia Eagles team. And I'm hoping it's Sam Bradford. I feel better if it's Sam Bradford. But by all means, it could be Nick Foles. Whether it is, we shall see. With that in mind, I'll close this edition of the Tyler Werner Show down. Thanks for tuning in as always. We'll talk to you next time on the Tyler Werner Show, right here on the YouTube channel.
Hi there, I'm Hank Hill. Well, I'd like to tell you what Strickland can do to meet your energy needs. You see, at Strickland, the customer comes first. It's kind of interesting. The word customer begins with CU. Well, we don't see you as just another sale, but as a member of our team. I thought you might enjoy 7.5 gallons of pure premium propane. Strickland Propane, the customer comes first.
What is it about good sex that makes me have to crap? Guess it's all that pumping. Pump and dump.
Pump and dump. Never stop the pumping. Always keep her satisfied. Pump and dump.
You really jarred something loose, Tiger.
Okay, Rocco, pretend I'm the girl that you want to ask out on a date.
How about maybe you and I, maybe we go out together, get something to eat, I don't know, maybe laugh a little bit, who knows, I don't know, would you like to maybe, you want me to go out together? What do you think? Would you like to?
You need to make more eye contact and you sound way too nervous.
You want to hear me say it? You want to break me down? All right, I'm afraid. For the first time in my life, I'm afraid.
Having a tough time asking out ladies? You need to see Clubber Lang for a lesson.
Hey, woman. Hey, woman. I bet you stay up late every night dreaming you had a real man, don't you? I tell you what, bring your pretty little self over to my apartment tonight, and I'll show you a real man.
Build confidence with the ladies like never before with Clubber Lang's dating services. The most highly recommended in all of the Delaware Valley.
I am rate number